Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Bleav in Bengal podcast presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Solomon Wilcots, and we get to look ahead with our Cincinnati Bengals insider, Charlie Goldsmith. And Charlie, look, week one, we start with the Cleveland Browns on the road. How do you feel about the Bengals getting off to a fast start when they got to go through the looks of Myles Garrett and the Jim Schwartz defense?
So something we do and something that I don't even love, but I engage with anyways. You try to come up with a bold prediction for the season. We're all about the bold predictions, who can be right in that game. And I'll share it here first. My official bold prediction for the 2025 Bengals season is that for the second time in Bengals history, they scored 30 points in each of their first two games. That's how strongly I feel about where the offense is at. That's how strongly I feel about how Joe Burrow looked in the preseason. Also, that's how strongly I feel that the Browns defense isn't quite what it used to be, and the Jaguars defense isn't up to that task either. So I think these first two games are going to feel a lot like the Panthers game from last year, and that could be a bit of history for the Bengals too, because I mentioned they'd only done it one other time. That other time was 2018. That game, the backup safety forced a fumble in the last 30 seconds and took it to the house. And that's the only reason why the Bengals scored 30 points in week two. So this could be the first, in my opinion, real time the Bengals score 30 points to open the season in back-to-back games.
I think if they do it, people will look back and say, well, it was the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I don't feel as comfortable as you do because Jim Schwartz is one of the best defensive coordinators in football. He's had multiple weeks to prepare for a Bengals defense that scored 30 or more points in 8 games last year. And the Cleveland Browns, because most of the focus has been on what? Shedeur Sanders, who's going to be the quarterback. People are sleeping on this draft class by the Cleveland Browns. Andrew Berry, their general manager, is one of the best talent evaluators as a GM, I think, in the NFL. They've got 4 first-round picks, Charlie, playing on this defense. Not to mention, we haven't blocked Myles Garrett in any of the games when he's played against us. And so Myles Garrett, they got a really high first-round pick in this year's draft in Mason Graham from the Michigan Wolverines. They got another guy who's a second-round pick, but Carson Schlesinger was the first overall pick in the second round. He's as good as a first-round pick. And this kid can flat out play as a rookie coming in from UCLA. And they have 2 first-round picks at the cornerback position. We know how good Denzel Ward is. We know how good Greg Newsome is. So when you have 4 first-round picks on the defense and a defensive line with the likes of Malik Collins, Shelby Harris, as well as Mason Graham and Myles Garrett, pump the brakes on 30 points now. But I'm with you. I feel good that Joe Burrow is as close to mid-season Joe Burrow as we have seen him coming into game number 1 throughout his entire career. Am I right?
They just had so much time to even advance the offense in training camp, which they had never been able to do before because guys had been missing time, guys had been hurt.
Right.
Burrow's just throwing the ball so well right now. Like, I think a story that's gone under discussed has been just the overs, the daggers, whatever you want to call them, those throws over the middle that he's led the receiver. He's zipped the ball and he's kind of dropped it in the bucket, even from different arm angles into some incredibly tight windows. Those throws on that route, that was the story of Burrow's training camp. That kind of showed me what I need to know about the timing, the chemistry, the connection, the zip from Burrow. And then the wrinkles that I know they've got stuff up their sleeve with, year 2 of Gesicki, with an expanded role for Chase Brown and Andre Yosevich. Charlie Jones might have a package, like stuff like that. Yeah. They've got tricks up their sleeve that they feel very confident in.
Well, the Bengals have, I think, their 5 skilled players around Joe are as good as it's going to get. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, we know about, but Andre Yosevich is, with the experience and the chemistry that he has now with Joe Burrow. You and I both know Joe trusts Yosh as much as he does Jamar Chase and T. Higgins right now. And that's saying a lot. But Yosh has earned the trust of Joe Burrow. And I think Charlie Jones has gone next level. That throw against the Commanders, that touchdown pass in the end zone, that was a dime from Joe. It tells you that he is operating at midseason level. And Mitchell Tinsley, dare I say, he may have passed up Jermaine Burton in terms of the trust factor that he has from the both quarterbacks, right? But we all know that Jermaine Burton is a talent, but has Tinsley sort of passed him up? We know Mike Gesicki's got great chemistry with Joe, and obviously Chase Brown. The five skilled positions on the Bengals are just clocking right now. But I think we might have Mitchell Tinsley could be a surprise that could sneak up on opponents.
There are two big questions I have on this depth chart. One, real quick, is what exactly McKinley Jackson's role is after a disappointing preseason. And then the other is Jermaine Burton versus Mitch Tinsley. Because the way I see it, especially because I expect Tanner Hudson to be active, is that only one of Burton or Tinsley will be active. Now you get into special teams. Tinsley hadn't shown the ability to make an impact on special teams. Neither has Burton except as a kick returner, but did Charlie Jones beat out Jermaine Burton to be this team's primary kick returner? The other guy I would expect would be in the backfield on kick returns would be P. Ryan, because he could kind of block, but if they force kick the ball to him, he can also do a bit as well. So like that kick return battle between Jones and Burton could be the difference there. But if you were just looking for who could give you the most as a receiver right now, you like Burton on the vertical route tree, but you need to do more than that. It would come down to Tinsley. His versatility, I think, will give him an edge just as a true receiver.
Joe Burrow's 1-9 through their first two games throughout his 5-year career. It's the second worst record by a starting quarterback since 1950. Does that change after week 1 and the Bengals visit to the Cleveland Browns?
I just really do believe that if you boil it down to why did the Bengals start slow, it was just the guys who missed significant time in training camp, were coming off major injuries, were holding in. Just look at the guys who really struggled. Like even last year, the defense didn't play pretty well for its relative standard for the first 2 weeks of the season. It's mostly just been the guys who have missed time, and the time they had together in camp to take the offense to a rare level in terms of continuity and readiness for week 1. I just believe in this group, and I think it's going to be a completely different story this season.
How do you feel about the defense? Because that group has missed time. Trey Hendrickson, we know that he's a gamer. He's going to give his best, but there's no substitute for time on task. And did Shemar Stewart make it to training camp with enough time to make up for the missed time during OTAs? Those are the two guys I think we have to pay attention to the most. I'm going to get to the secondary in a minute, but give me what you got on Trey Hendrickson and Shemar Stewart.
It's going to have to be a heavy rotation. I'll throw BJ Hill into that camp as well, because all three of those guys missed time in camp. We're kind of behind the 8 ball a bit. Al Golden said they're going to be kind of, until the coin toss, they're going to be working on stuff with those guys because it's a new staff. What do you have? What do you need to learn? Techniques, all of that kind of stuff. So there should be a pretty heavy rotation on the defensive line in Cleveland. And a part of it too is, you can't know right now what those snap counts are going to be. They're going to have to see, one, how they look, how they're operating, just where they're at as a whole on the field. And then game situation too. Like if the offense is having these long drives and there's a good chance for those guys to rest, well, then they can play more of the snaps. So a lot of moving pieces in terms of what you can expect from those 3 guys.
That leads me to 2 other guys who I think are going to be playing significant plays, maybe even starting if you're Joseph Ossai, but he and Chris Jenkins are 2 guys that I see as starters. They're going to play enough reps, particularly in the month of September, where their level of performance is going to weigh heavily in terms of how the defense is impacted as a whole. What do you have on Joseph Ossai, Chris Jenkins early to start off the 2025 season? What's their contributions looking like?
Yeah, it should be such a heavy rotation that Ossai will feel like a starter if he's not already, or Murphy or Stewart or whoever you want to say is that third defensive end. And then same with Chris Jenkins. The story for 3 years for 4 years, I guess 3 years since 2022 with BJ Hill is that he's been playing too many snaps, but they just haven't had that backup behind him who could give him a spell and keep him fresh. Jenkins should be able to do that. There's a lot of confidence and excitement about the camp that he had. And then Ossai, even if he's not on the field for the very first snap, but there's a very good chance he might be, what
Yeah.
he can do rushing around the edge, what he can do moving inside on third downs. He could be this team's best interior pass rusher. There are so many different areas where he can make an impact. He'll be on the field a ton this season.
How much did Shemar Stewart wreck the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line that proved to them they needed to go out and add more pieces? So now here comes Dalton Reasoner. They're still adding guys to the practice squad. I was at practice. I saw you there. Shemar Stewart wreaked enough havoc every single day in practice where the Bengals started scratching their head like, we need to do more. We need to add more pieces. He at least showed them that they needed to maybe upgrade in the interior portion of this offensive line.
Shemar's just different. Like
Yeah,
Trey's obviously a better player right now, but Shemar can get to a gear that even Trey doesn't have, that Sam Hubbard didn't have, that Carl Lawson didn't have. I guess it's an edge or a gear that this defensive line hasn't had since Carlos Dunlap was in his
that's
prime.
right.
And again,
Yeah,
that's just different. Now, Shamar's not going to be a finished product. And I think
no.
just like any rookie, you should expect ups and downs, a bit of a roller coaster. There are going to be some bad plays, but then there are going to be some moments. And the whole idea and vision of this defense, anyway, is that it's not going to be a good defense, especially right away. But can it be
Mhm.
volatile enough that the pendulum will swing in an explosive direction and you'll get a few of those moments that can kill a drive or change field position? Do stuff like that. Shemar has a good chance to be one of those players. It won't all be pretty, but he can be volatile, and this defense needs some of that.
How much will this Bengals run defense prove to be worthy week one? They gave up an average of 170 rush yards per game in the preseason. All three teams they faced in the preseason, it got worse as it went on. The Eagles were successful in that first game, and then Commanders did even better. And then the third game, the Colts rushed for 190 plus yards. It got worse and worse. And I know a lot of those guys aren't going to be playing, but a lot of the guys who were in those games were actually playing. So, how much can it improve over what we saw during the preseason, the run defense?
I'm concerned. Even
Yeah.
last year, kind of a quiet storyline. Sam Hubbard was their
Yes.
best run defender, still even last season. Even though he
Mhm.
was far from 100%, he still by
Yes.
far did the most against the run for the Bengals. Now, what they did do is they got TJ Slayton, whose camp I keep saying reminded me of Chidobe Awuze's camp from 2021. Awuzie
Yeah.
came in that year, and it was like, you know what? This guy's just good. Like, why
He's
hasn't he been a
good.
starter for his whole
Just keeps
career?
playing. Yeah.
And I think Slayton had that kind of camp, maybe the most impressive training camp to me. But BJ Hill wasn't quite as dynamic against the run in 24. He has to find that gear again. Logan Wilson, and he's right. He'll tell you it was completely injury related for him. He had a Baker's cyst on around his knee, and he couldn't get into a stance by the end of the year. But he has to be more aggressive, physical, and downhill. Demetrius Knight didn't have that kind of Jermaine Pratt downhill ability in college. They've tried to develop that in him. He needs to hit the ground running with that. If Sam Hubbard was this team's best run stopper last year, Mike Hilton was their second best run stopper last year.
Yes.
Dax Hill has to do some of that this season. I'm more worried about the back seven. Slayton will really help, but you add the edges into
Yeah.
that mix too, and there's a lot a lot of development that has to take place.
Look, I think the Bengals had, I think I counted 8 players drafted in the first 3 rounds in the last 4 years, right? 2022, 23, 24, and now this year in 2025. We're talking names like Daxio DJ Turner, Cam Taylor Britt, Jordan Battle was a third round selection, Demetrius Knight, and obviously Shamar Stewart, and Miles Murphy. These are high draft picks on a defense that if you're going to pay your quarterback and your offensive players this kind of money, almost like Kansas City, they use the draft picks to supplement the defense, and they hit with Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis. These guys, year one, they were starters going right back to the Super Bowl. How important is it for the guys who are doing the talent evaluation in Cincinnati, who are drafting the players? Because you can't go fire a defense coordinator again, right? How
Yeah.
important is it that these draft picks and those names that I just gave you, how important is it that they begin to live up to their draft status and become household names here in Cincinnati?
Well, the big flag that was planted was that Duke Tobin and Al Golden said, "We believe in these defensive backs," so much that they didn't add a single one.
That's right.
That was what they saw when they turned on the tape and reflected on last season and came up with kind of development plans for each of them about taking their games to another level. But that was the decision that will either have them looking like geniuses in January or we'll have the Bengals on the couch in January. That to me is the swing factor for the entire season, whether or not they had the right evaluations of these defensive backs.
There's one player that I'm going to watch the entire season. Just like we can't take our eyes off Jesse Bates, right? Since he left Cincinnati, he's in Atlanta playing great football, and it's just every time we see him, we're like, that was one we let get away. There's another in this year's draft, Xavier Woods, who's a safety with Notre Dame last year. You know, I've talked a lot about him.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up going in the third round to Atlanta. He knew and still does. He knows Al Golden's defense like the back of his hand. He's a player. Now I'm playing with Jesse Bates in Atlanta that I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to because that guy was a third round selection. I know we could have taken him. I think he would have helped our defense immensely. That leads me to this question because I didn't see a lot of Geno Stone during the preseason. Where is he right now in terms of his fitness as a day one starter? And how much better do you think he'll be? I would say year number 2 on the defense, but it's a new scheme brought in by Al Golden. So it's almost like Geno Stone goes back to square one. What can we expect from him?
What Gino will tell you is that the new scheme fits his strengths a lot better than Lou Anarumo's did, and that it's a lot more like what he did in Baltimore when he was most successful. But what you can expect from him, I can only go off what I saw last season in terms of gauging where he's at, and especially because he missed a good chunk of camp with a soft tissue injury. And I Bleav Gino made 3 plays on the ball all year last year and gave up a whole lot more than that. So that's an area of concern for me. They have to deploy him in better spots. And that's one of those things that Al Golden's just going to have to do well because he's not a dynamic center fielder. He's not great at the contested catch point. There are just limitations in his game. Now, there are also strengths in his game, strengths that Lou Anarumo didn't feature. And when you look at Al Golden and his responsibility, that's going to be one of the most important pieces for developing the structure and the scheme of this defense.
Geno Stone's got great ball skills. He came out of the University of Iowa. You remember he made big plays for the Baltimore Ravens at the back end of their secondary. Wasn't a highly drafted player, but his ball skills, I think, are his strength. And that's what he brings to the table. I want to ask you one last question before we go, because I have conversations with Zach Taylor. And one thing that he thinks the Cincinnati Bengals offense, because I think he's been a great play caller. The 30 points in 8 games last year is a testament to Zach Taylor and his ability to call plays. I don't want to hear fans questioning his play calling because he's one of the best in the game. I seen him go toe-to-toe with Andy Reid and win on multiple occasions, okay? So we need to start giving Zach Taylor his credit as a play caller. But one thing that I'm hearing from him that he believes will make this a better offense in 2025, and that's improving the run game. He's talked about that. He wants to be more complimentary with the run game and not be forced to throw. And he's got Chase Brown, he's got Taj Brooks, and Samaje Perine. Only 3 running backs right now on the roster. What are you seeing from this team with this offensive line and that backfield set? Do you see us being able to run the ball better than we did 1 year ago?
Yes, but also it's kind of as simple as, get the ball to your best playmakers, right? And Chase Brown's one of this team's best playmakers. He's behind T. Higgins, but that gap might not even be that seismic, considering how highly the Bengals view Chase Brown and what he showed during the second half of last season, and the concepts they have designed for different runs between the tackles, as well as different opportunities to run routes outside of the backfield. There are a lot of ideas to get Brown the ball. It's as simple as, again, just get the ball to your best players. And Chase Brown's at the point where he's one of the Bengals' best players. And with that being a running back, that could lead to an offense that looks a little bit different.
Well, Charlie, you're one of our best players. You make plays every single time you come on the Bleav in Bengal podcast presented by FanDuel. We appreciate you. We thank you for joining us. We're going to see you next week because we'll be talking about how these Bengals played in their week 1 game against the Cleveland Browns. It's all about getting off to a in 2025 and watching Joe Burrow and this offense click like they're in mid-season form. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to you all joining us again next week.